Absolutely.
So,
So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Professional Photographers of Orange County, our general monthly meeting. Tonight, we will be featuring our special speaker, Mr. Stephen Burns. But before we get started with that, I've got a couple of announcements to make. Coming up on July 16th is PPOC's Image Competition number 2. So start getting your photographs ready. And speaking of image competition, on June 21st, we have the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve Photo Walk. Okay, and I got ahead of myself. Now related to image competition, on June 18th will be the PPOC Image Competition Prep Review and Critique. So if you have any work that you are not sure how it may fare in competition, go ahead, check out the website. You can submit your photographs there, and we will be doing a live critique, giving you recommendations and suggestions on work that could be done to give you the best chances of scoring an all desired 80 or above during the competition. Coming up this Friday, just out of coincidence, we have Toning It Down live and in person with Stephen Burns. If you're not sure what it's about, hang out this evening. He's going to talk a little bit about what we'll be covering in the in-person workshop. And I need to give a quick thank you to our board of directors. It's wonderful getting to sit in your living room chair, office desk, turning on Zoom, and having a bunch of people online that want to talk photography, but all of this doesn't happen with the snap of a finger. So I need to give a special thanks out to our president, John Aranis, Miss Brandy Constantino, Mr. Mike Sorensen, our newest member, Arizu Jalali, Mr. Tim Mathieson, and myself, Dwayne Murphy. We do the work behind the scenes to bring these programs to everybody and try and help you become better photographers and build better businesses through Professional Photographers of Orange County. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mr. Stephen Burns, who may shoot me because this was not previously scripted or even discussed, so I hope one or two of these facts may actually be fairly accurate. Stephen Burns, I met him through one of our judging events through the San Diego Fair, and unbeknownst to me, I've come to learn that he is the president of the largest Photoshop users group in the United States. He's also an Adobe educational leader and international instructor. He has written several books on Photoshop, including 3D Photoshop for Creative Professionals, The Art of Poser and Photoshop, and an entire series on Photoshop, CS, trickery, and effects. When he's not talking locally here in Orange County, you can find him all over the country with the Photoshop team. He's been exhibited internationally, and this really took me for a loop. He's had work shown in Durban Art Museum in South Africa, Citizens Gallery in Yokohama, Japan, the Seacup Museum of Mexico, and he currently teaches at Golden West College, Otis College of Art and Design. He runs his own workshops via Zoom, and we are lucky enough to have him this Friday live and in person here in Orange County. With that, Stephen, you want to say hello?
yes, hello, everybody. Oh, it's great having me again. This will be my second workshop that we plan together. Coming up this Friday. The first one was packed. Very fun. It's just a lot of fun. I think the first one we were focusing on basically taking your photography to a whole nother artistic level, where we're just taking your photographs and learning to composite them and making them something a little more artistic. Now in this workshop coming up, we're gonna really focus on how to master our tones, how to master the image so that we can make your photography more expressive. Um, so I guess you're giving it to me. Actually, I need to share my screen, don't I?
That would be helpful.
Okay, good. All right, and I'm going to double click. There we go. Everybody sees my screen now. What you're taking a look at now is my home page. I've actually put the link in the chat box, and I will do it again for your convenience. So I'm going to put admit. I'm seeing little buttons show up here at the top here. Yeah, I teach at taught at a lot of different places. Um, I'm going to put my website right there. There you go. Everybody can go and take a look at it. My first teaching job was over at UCSD. With the it was kind of like the extension section where everybody can take the class, including the students and the public. And I taught there for 11 years. And this was back in the day before digital existed. And I was doing a lot of, most of my classes was on advanced darkroom techniques. So I was using the 4x5 camera, so people would take my particular class would bring their 4x5 camera or medium format, and well, now we would get into techniques for processing film. The advanced class was all about teaching the zone system, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, um, and then processing the negatives so that we can get the optimal print in the darkroom. Um, Half the battle was the composition. The other half was how to make your work expressive. That's one of the things that I'm seeing at these international fairs, competitions. I've been judging for the International Photography Exhibition in San Diego, which is the largest in the country. Yes, it's the largest international photography exhibition in the United States at the San Diego County Fairgrounds. I ran that. I ran that as the a coordinator for 2 years. And I think that was right after Donna Cosentino had stepped down. I took over, if my memory serves me correct. So I've the workshops that we have there now, um, they're currently Lois and Amithel, who are currently running the exhibition, will have these workshops every week. I was the one that started that. Donna started the workshops with me only. I was the only presenter there back in the day. When I took over, I brought in multiple presenters, and that was how the whole thing got started. And it's just great to see it just flourish and still going. All right, so I'm going to talk just very quickly about my website. Check it out. If you want to know where I am, go to my About section here, and under About, go to Speaking Schedule. And my webmaster did a great job on this, and there is my speaking gigs there. So if you want to could jump in, most of them are probably the free workshops, the promote a paid workshop. So they're in combination there. You can see my SD fair. I'm also doing free workshops for the fair. Of course, free, which are paid admission to the fairgrounds, of course. So you will see SD fair right in front of those. You will see other workshops that I teach as well. They're not particularly along photography, but the fair is all about photography. Now, if I go back real quick, get to know more about me, about Stephen, you can check that out there. There you'll see my just a description, including my resume at it should be, yeah, my resume at the bottom, which Dwayne was so kindly to share with everybody. Testimonials, so I value testimonials. So if you give me a great review or a compliment, it goes right here with your name on it. All right, so I do take those seriously. Showcase. Now, if you want to see what I do as an artist, go to the digital art section, and you get the pop up some of the stuff that I do. Now, I started off as a photographer. I went to school for photography, Palomar College, got my certificate, worked under photographers, went career-wise as a professional photographer, mostly commercial, but of course my weddings and senior portraits and all that stuff. I did all of that to make a living. And then that transitioned into the digital in time. So some of these you see here are actual digital paintings. These are not photographs painted on top of. These are actually actual painting started from scratch on a blank layer in Photoshop. Okay. And and you can see some examples. Let me show you another example here. Examples of those there. Um, and then down on the bottom, see other examples where I'm using a combination of digital painting and photography all blended together. Okay. So you can come through here and check these out on your own. You're welcome to do so. And as I go back, I have my workshop. So we'll talk about some of those a little bit later. But go to each category and we'll chat more about these in a little bit. I've got a photography workshop. The two coming up is the Eastern Sierra and the Death Valley class, which are magnificent places, very different in their content. The whole idea is to get you out of your environment at home, take you to a place that's unique and different so that you can improve your skills as a photographer. All right. So as I started talking about earlier, I started at UCSD, taught at Palomar College for a few years for the photography department, then for the graphic arts department as the Photoshop instructor. That led to Irvine Valley College, that led to Golden West College, that led to Coast College and Otis College, which is the premier art school in Los Angeles. And now I'm teaching at not Golden West, already said Golden West, but over at Studio Arts in Los Angeles. All right, so the store is basically more workshops and other stuff that I sell. But anyways, go here, check it out, enjoy it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on it if you like. So let's start talking about our presentation. Toning it down. So I've been a judge as well as a coordinator for a lot of years for the photography exhibition. And what I notice is that everyone who enters that exhibition has great love and passion for their photography. They have an incredible, deep love and passion for photography. You see it in the way they handle the subject, and you see it in the way they compose the subject. What I found most are weak at are the post-processing skills. So most of the work, most of your vision is going to be completed in the dark room. Now, I just wanted to share just a couple of inspirations and talk about their approach. And then I want to get more into, what I'm going to be talking about on Friday. So on Friday, I'm doing a full day workshop for PPOC, and it's called Toning It Down. It's about taking your photography, mastering those tones and values so that you're producing an award-winning image. The award-winning image happens beyond the composition. It goes beyond the composition, and it happens in your final vision and post-processing. So here's an example of one of Ansel Adams' shots. Ansel Adams is one of my first inspirations as a photographer because before I got into photography, I was doing drawing, I was taking classes. In fact, my girlfriend and I at the time was taking we were taking a life drawing class together at Palomar College. And I figured I'll buy a camera. It was a Minolta X700. And I had no idea how to use, I had no idea what those controls in the camera. What was a aperture? What was a shutter speed? I had no idea. So I decided to go to Palomar College and just take an entry level color slide course just so I can get used to the camera. Why? So that I can take pictures so I can use them for drawing and painting. I took the class and I was hooked. I took another class and I was even more hooked. My girlfriend at the time and I went to Yosemite to do a camping trip. Neither of us have been to San Francisco before. So we decided, well, since San Francisco was fairly close considering, Why don't we just go over there and check it out? So we went over there, and our first place that we drove by was the De Young Museum. At the time that I was passing by, it happened to have an Ansel Adams exhibit. Now, at the time I was taking my black and white 101, my photo 101 class, was like an entry level to black and white processing and black and white printing. We were using medium format film. We were using the twin lens reflex cameras. I think of the Yashicas or somewhere around there. I forget. So I went in the museum because I was just introduced to Ansel Adams, so I figured let's go see his work because it's something that my instructors always talk about. Went to the museum and saw these mural-sized prints, and I sat there floored and stared, and I thought to myself, how the hell is it that his work is so masterful and mine sucked so bad? So I made the decision right there as I'm looking at his work that I was going to take every class I could and learn everything I could so I can get my work somewhat close to what Ansel had produced. Ansel learned to master the tones. He learned to master the values. He learned how to distribute the values in such a way that it became more texturous and more luminous and more dynamic. And I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn how to produce these tones. So I learned how to the zone system technique. I understand when I first bought I first bought my 4x5 camera, basically negatives that are, big square negatives is 4x5 inches, produced for me such an amazing tonal value that I had to learn how to print all over again. So my suggestion for this class is that we learn to see all over again. And we learn to get the color out of the way because that's the problem with most photographers today. We're living in a very strange time in photography. And back in the day, before digital, we knew who the masters were in photography. Now, I'm not quite so sure if we know who the real masters are in photography because social media and the immediacy of digital photography has got everybody thinking they've mastered the art of photography. Mastering those values so that your work becomes more expressive. You're not just there to get a good print. And that's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the work on the walls at the competitions, is that people are getting it good enough to display on the wall, but they're not using expressive means of doing it. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. This is the work of Ray McSavany. Another one of my favorites. I think he was an LA photographer. Um, just the way he mastered the tones, detail everywhere in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. You're going to hear me talk about that a lot on Friday. Shadows, midtones, and highlights. I'm going to break down what that means in detail on Friday. Ray McSavany again. It didn't matter what he took. It was about the values. It was about the tones. It was about emotional expression, almost as if he was an abstract painter using photography as his medium to express himself. Another example of his work is all about the tones. It's all about mastering. Toning it down means mastering your shadows and mastering your highlights so that your work becomes expressive. You behaving like a sculptor and you're sculpting the tones so that you guide your viewer's eye to go where you want them to go. Um, I took these off the internet, so I've always made a habit. When I talk to my students and they're trying to improve, um, I call them on some things. One of the things I call them on is that they're not going to the museums and galleries to look at good photography. As a musician learns to master good music by listening to good music, listening to masterful music. I always made it a habit to go up to LA and to some of the photography galleries and collectors that have galleries and actually look at the original prints like this in person so that I can see what the artist meant to produce. Okay, so shall we go play a little bit here and kind of talk a little bit more about what we're going to do on Friday? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's about time. All right.
I've asked people to put questions in or use the reaction button to raise their hand as questions come up. And do you want to wait for a break, or shall I just call them
Yeah,
out and
just,
interrupt you?
just, just call them out and interrupt me. I like to get the dialogue going while I'm working. So just interrupt me and or just have them unmute your microphone and just talk or anything you want. Just ask away.
Will
All
do.
right.
Continue on.
All right. So the digital camera is our medium. Our medium's actually is pixels really, but the digital camera is the conduit to our medium. And Photoshop, for the most part, is industry standard as the post processing tool. We're going to learn to master Photoshop in such a way that you're going to really produce some interesting details in your work. You're going to learn to make your work a little more expressive. Okay, so I've got bridge here, and let me go to my toning it down category. And I brought some interesting examples that I'm going to play with here a little bit just to kind of make my point. All right. Let's see. What do I want to start with most? Let's start with this one right here. Okay. Um, these are CR2 files. They're Canon raw files. And here's one I think I'm going to start off with this one. This is one that's on my Eastern Sierra trip. And I took this particularly just for educational purposes to make a point. Let me see if I've got one, a work in progress. There we go. There is the final piece. Well, not really a final piece. It was just something I just played around with today, to see just how far I can go with, you know, getting the tones right, not right, but more expressive. Your job as a photographer is to take your work and make it more expressive. Let me share some of these. This is a shot from Death Valley. Again, using abstraction as a tool or as a source of composition. But again, it's about the tones. It's about how I compose the shapes to produce some very interesting tones to keep the viewer's interest. Um, this was on my Central Coast workshop, old abandoned barn we found along the coast. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I love the way this gave a sense of a potential subject matter. When I photographed this, none of these tones existed. This was all one continuous tone, closer to the tone of this wood right here. All of it. It was flat and it was boring. I had to make it interesting. This one here was a flat gray. When you go out to Death Valley, the difference between your shadows and highlights is usually about a one-stop difference, anywhere from a half to a one-stop difference. I had to use values to pull those tones apart to create something more sensual. Okay. And here's another example of my workshop to the Joshua Tree National Park. And again, if these stones are all a singular color or a singular tone, very boring and uninteresting. I needed to find a way to make it a little more interesting. And two shots of Death Valley I'll share with you. This is the Brisky Point. And again, it's all about, that repetition, breaking up that frame, creating something interesting here. But those values are the thing that's the most important. And another example, in the sand dunes, this is the difference between the actual darker regions and the brighter regions was actually one half a stop difference only. Okay. Um, all right, so let's go play. Let's go back to the main folder. Let's go grab this and we're gonna work on it. I think this is a good example because this is basically just a snapshot, right? So how can I make this snapshot a little bit better? In fact, I tell you what, why don't I get you guys involved? Let me go ahead and open this up and I want you to tell me what's wrong with this image. Anybody? What's wrong with this image?
I'm not seeing a real subject.
Okay, right. There's not a real subject. What else is wrong with it?
Really flat,
Very flat.
no contrast.
No contrast. Anything else?
There's the few highlights that pop up across the tule leaves ends up conflicting with the highlights that fall into the top of the trees, which then end up fighting with the rocks that are on the left-hand side, so you don't really have a central landing point.
Yeah. So let's see what we can do to kind of help improve this. Now, this is going to be a just kind of a nice little simple starting off approach. The trees are really the subject here, but obviously they're just not the subject because you get a lot of the tonal information conflicting with it. But yet, this is a good exercise to work with in terms of controlling these shadows and the highlights and even using the shadows. The lake here, the reflection here, needs more dynamic interest in here. It needs to not compete with the upper portion up here. So let's play with this one. So one of the first things we do, and everybody should know this already, is we're going to go down to the optics section. And of course, we're going to turn on and remove the chromatic aberration. And I always like to use my profile corrections. It automatically recognizes my profile for my metadata and makes any slight little corrections to improve upon it. If I like it, I can keep it. And I like it, I'll keep it. One of the problems that we're having as photographers is that the conduit, the digital camera, is producing color immediately. So visually, we want to start manipulating the color. In fact, Adobe has set up Adobe Camera Raw so that, well, it used to set it up where your color bars were at the top, right? That your color bars at the top first as your first thing to manipulate. But of course, they moved it around because they started to realize how they really should be working. Well, it's not really that obvious, but one of the first things we need to do is we need to get the color out of your way. Your color is in your way. Um, and we can't see the real detail in here. We can't really see all the real information. So we're going to take the color out completely, and we're going to come down to the color section. This workflow is absolutely, emphatically identical to Lightroom. There is no difference. All Lightroom is Adobe Camera Raw and Bridge put together with a database engine joined to it. This is the same workflow. What I do here, you do exactly in Lightroom. We'll go down to the color and I'm going to pull it out. Go to saturation all the way out, zero it out. Now we can see the real detail in here. Right? Now you really can't see what the subject is. You really see where the highlights are. And this is a good thing. It looks boring, it looks plain, but that's a good thing because now we get to see what we're dealing with in reality. When I took classes in my photography program, we were never allowed to touch color until the last semester before a certificate. We did black and white the entire time because those values were the key. So one of the problems is that you have too much lower tones in your image that it blocks out the detail throughout the medium gray areas. Shadows, midtones, and highlights. Shadows, midtones, and highlights. Right? So we go to the shadow slider first. Now you see how Adobe's organized stuff? They start with the exposure and the contrast, and they say go to the next one, and go to the next one, and go to the next one. That is not how I recommend that you work. But let's get to understand them first. So the first thing is that the exposure is adjusting your shadows, midtones, and highlights equally, right? It's adjusting them equally. And we can see the histogram giving you an end result. Double click on that to reset it back to 0. Contrast is enhancing your shadows and highlights independently, so you're getting greater contrast or a flatter image. Contrast is the devil, never use it. And I'm going to double click it, then reset it back. Highlights targets your highlights only. That's it, just the highlights. And I can make them brighter or to make them darker. And look at that. Look at the detail we have in there. We couldn't see it here as much, and definitely not over here. So we're going to pull it down so that we're gaining a lot more detail within that highlight region. So as you see, we're starting to really flatten out the image. But if we pay attention by bringing up the highlights down, we're gaining more details in these brighter tonal areas, particularly these areas down here. Now we have to deal with something else. Shadows have a tendency to block out detail as well. So if you look in these lower tonal areas, there is a lot of little information back there. If I kind of, zoom in a little closer, there's information back there, but it's hard to see because we got shadows. So if I go to the left on shadows, it just darkens it up. But if I go to the right, it opens them up more, right? Now it starts to open up that detail back there. Control 0 will fit the whole thing in the view. Control plus, zoom in a little bit so you can see what we're doing. So now we've got this very, 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 very flat image. That is a good thing. Okay. Now, I'm thinking bring up more of those shadows. Well, the blacks are your stream blacks. So in other words, if you look at your highlights here, we're dealing with look at my mouse here where it was highlighted. That's the range of that's the range of highlights. That's the range it's affecting. The shadows, this is the range it's affecting. Now, when we go to whites and blacks now, the blacks are over here in a small little edge. See that little highlight there? That's the blacks it's going to manipulate. And for the whites, this is the whites that it's manipulating. So if I go to my blacks and pull it to the left, it richens those areas up. But to bring back contrast in your image, we don't want to do that just yet. We're going to pull up the shadows. So there we go. Yeah, why am I doing this? Because I can see detail in there now. Oh, wow, there's detail in there. Now, most people get confused at this point because they're thinking, I'm not supposed to go, I'm not supposed to flatten the image out. Oh, yeah, you are. You're supposed to. No one never explained it to you this way before. All right. So you're out in Death Valley, guys. Imagine yourselves. You're out in Death Valley. You set up your camera. You've got mountains way in the background. When you compose your shot, how does the background appear to you visually? Someone just open your microphone up and talk. What's going on in the background?
It's often going to be a little bit darker than your foreground. It will often have less contrast
Why?
just from the haze.
Excellent. The haze. What's the nature of haze that it has less contrast?
It's it's kind of adding a little bit of it's like adding dust to it. It's going to make the lights darker and the darks lighter.
Right, or the moisture molecules floating around is magnifying the light source and it's doing what? It's not touching your highlights. It's touching only your shadows. So it brings the shadows way up, keeps the shadow highlights where they are in your scene, therefore flattening the whole thing out, making this flat, bright background that looks like fog, right? That's what fog does. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to the effects panel now. Now that we've done our work up here in the values, right? That's why these are all medium grays, because these are only dealing with values. We've eliminated the color. In fact, we're going to cascade it up so it's not in front of our face right now. And we're going to go down to effects, and we're going to start with dehaze. There's a reason they call it dehaze, a stupid name, but there's a reason they call it dehaze. Because if I take the slider and pull it to the left, what dehaze does, remember what the fog is doing or the haze is doing, is bringing up the shadows only, not touching the highlights. So if I go to the dehaze and pull it down, you get more haze. Why? Because the shadows are coming up in value. If we take the dehaze the opposite way, we get dehaze. Look what's happening. What the hell just happened? It's targeting only the extreme darker values and really strengthening them all up. And what you're going to get as an end result is an image with an incredible detail and snap without areas being blocked up. All right, we're just starting. So we're just starting. So that's what I do. I start with the shadow areas first, bring them up to get detail. Next, the highlights to bring them down to get detail, flattening out the image. Then I come over here to the whites and the blacks and adjust them accordingly. All right, so let's go to the next step. Because we've played around with adjusting the values of the shadows and highlights independently, which is why contrast is the devil. We want to control the shadows and the highlights independently, which is what we did. We don't want Photoshop going and doing it for us because it just mucks it up. So we don't touch contrast. So I'm gonna come down to go above dehaze now. Now that we played around with the shadows and highlights, we've sacrificed the midtone. The
David?
midtone is very flat. Yeah, somebody has a question?
Yeah, actually, we don't touch contrast.
Yep.
If you, when you're starting and you see that your photograph is underexposed, half stop, full stop, would you begin by adjusting the exposure first or try to pull out what you can without adjusting the exposure?
If it's if it's absolutely underexposed by a stop or more, I'll adjust the exposure to get it properly at where it should be, or at least where I think it should be, and then come in and mess with the shadows and the highlights.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but we never touch contrast. Your question is a exposure question, not a contrast question. Um, okay, so I go to effects. I brought the dehaze down to bring back the blacks, okay? Now, because I sacrificed the midtones, I want to start adding contrast back into the midtones. That's what clarity does. Clarity targets your midtones only. Okay. So I'm going to go to the clarity and watch what happens. If I take the clarity slider and move it to the left, now I'm seeing people taking notes, but this is being recorded. So I recommend you don't take notes and just watch me because you're going to get the recording afterwards. Yeah, that means you, Roy. So if I move this over to the left, look what happens. It's softening up because it's only targeting the midtones. But if we bring it over to the right, look at what was happening. You're starting to get some separation between your shadows and highlights now. All right. Um, I might want to go to the dehaze, and I think I'm going to move it over a little bit more. I think the darks can be a little bit richer, so I'm going to pull it over to the right like that. Yeah, that's better. I'm digging that. I'm liking this. I use Adobe Camera Raw in the beginning because it's become that good now. In the beginning, when ACR came out, ACR sucked. And it's only now that ACR is good enough for me to use for as part of my workflow. All right, so now clarity. I might be able to push a little more clarity in there. Like there we go. I don't want too much. I don't want it, choppy looking or too crispy looking. Now, dehaze is targeting the shadows only. Shadows. Clarity is targeting the midtones and medium grays only. Midtone. Texture targets what? The highlights only. Highlights. All it's going to do. We might be able to see it a little better down here. Okay. But we'll see. I can see half and half here. In fact, I'll get in a little closer. I'm too close. Okay. There we go. So if I go to my texture, which is now targeting only the highlights, we're going to pull those tonal ranges further apart within the highlights. We're going to get more into the range of tones that exist in shadows, midtones, and highlights separately on Friday. if I move the slider over to the right, look at that. I want to be careful how far I bring it because I don't want it crispy. I just want to add a little separation, and it's going to look like it's really sharpened up. But did I add any sharpness to any of this? No, I don't need to because I'm learning to master the values. The values has always been where your detail lie. Always. It's not in the color at all. It's in the values. This is going to make more sense in just a little bit. I'm looking at the bottom down here, and I'm thinking maybe I might sacrifice a little bit. Maybe I'll come back up, go to the blacks, and pull them down just a little bit like that. Add a little richness, like the bass to music that catapults the treble forward. Just add a little bit of richness in there. Okay. All right, Command 0. Okay. That looks a little more interesting. That's a lot more interesting looking black and white image than we had before. So, all right, so I'm thinking, let's bring the color back now, just to make a point. Let's go down. I cascaded the color up right here. Let's open up the color. And let's get in close. Maybe I'll fill the screen like this. Okay. Maybe not. Like that works. Yeah. And let's bring in a little saturation. Let's say a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. How's that looking? Maybe a little bit more, not much more, probably right about there's all I need. Okay, we're not done yet. We're just using this as the beginning stages. But what I want you to notice is that, look at this slider. Zero's right here. Did it need to go further? No. Why? What's going on here?
Because the dehaze is up and that's adding saturation.
Well, okay, let me correct you.
Okay.
We're not adding any saturation at all. None. What happens when you add saturation to an image? You go closer to 255 white for your red, green, and blue channel. That's what happens with saturation. We're not doing that at all. We're not touching the color at all. So what's really happening here? It's
By adjusting the black and white values, the shadows, blacks, whites, and highlights closer to their represented black and white values, you're
that's
creating more
exactly
definition within the photograph.
well, that's one of the reasons, yes. But another big reason, that's true. But another big reason is because Photoshop doesn't work in RGB. Ever. Photoshop does not work in CMYK. Ever. It works in one mode and one mode only. And this is a mode we're going to talk about in the Friday class. And that's LAB.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
That's the only mode Photoshop works in. Photoshop fakes it to make it look like an RGB adjustment, but it's not. Now let's compare this to the original. So I'm going to click Done and then go over to Bridge. And I've got another one right next to it that I actually played around with. So I'm going to right click on this one, develop settings, and then clear all those settings. Okay, so that's what it was. And this is what we just produced. Just in Adobe Camera Raw. We're not finished with this yet, but just in Adobe Camera Raw before flat and a lot more interesting. Before and there. So what we did when we brought this into Adobe Camera Raw is by removing the color, force Photoshop into the LAB mode. When we remove the color, Photoshop goes, oh, okay, L channel, lightness channel, just deal with that. It completely ignored the color. The red, green, and blue, the cyan, magenta, yellow, it completely ignored it. Doesn't even touch it. Isn't that interesting? In Friday's class, we will actually use LAB and show you how to really master your work.
Very interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So I'm going to push it back to close to where we were. I'll put it like right there. And we're going to click on open, but we're not done. Okay? Because all LAB, all ACR is just a quick little adjustments that you make to your raw file so that you can bring it into Photoshop to do your real mastery. Now we're going to have some fun.
Stephen, I'm going to ask a question, and if you're covered Friday, then that's great.
Sure.
For those of us that are dangerous with Photoshop, can you take a moment and explain what lab mode is, or LAB?
Are you talking to me or everybody else?
Talking to you, Stephen.
Oh, to me. Okay, got
I'm
it. Okay,
guessing there's a couple of people here that have no idea
okay.
what lab is.
All right. So we'll do it right now. Let me duplicate this layer so I can get that done ahead of time. Okay. If you go up to your image menu in Photoshop, by default, you're always working in RGB. Go to my channels. See? My RGB composite, red channel, green channel, blue channel. Interesting that they're in values. And I'm going to show you guys how to use these individual channels. I'm going to show you that right now in just a little bit to really master your tones. Red, green, blue, red, green, blue. I'll talk about those in just a little bit. But if you go over to image menu, mode, here are all of your color spaces you can work in that most of us know about, but we don't know about LAB color, lab color. When I click on the lab color and say don't flatten, guess what we get now? All of your values in one channel and your all of your color is split between two channels. I'm not going to talk about what they do. I'm going to talk about that on Friday. But there is your lightness channel, which is where all of your values exist.
Very
And on
cool.
on Friday, I'll show you how to use this to really master your work. So those who truly, if you look at some of the masters' work who are using Photoshop, um, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the color photographer's name. He's still around. I took a workshop from him back when I was a kid. And Kramer is his last name. Kramer. Oh gosh darn, I wish I'm forgetting his first name. I'll look it up when we take break, something.
While you're trying to come up with that, I've got a couple of messages from people asking if they should bring photos on Friday.
You are welcome to. I'm going to bring photos for us to work together on so we can work as a team. But then I want you to bring some of your own so that you can apply some of this, to your work too. And I might even just take we'll just probably agree to choose one person's work, bring it in, put it up on screen and manipulate it.
And were you
And
trying
I
to think of
love
Charles Kramer?
Charles Kramer. That's it. I took a workshop from him when I was a kid. That was when I was actually just finished my certificate program at Palomar College. I took the dye transfer class from him. He's somebody who's mastered a lot of this stuff.
For Friday, do we want to bring our laptops and all that too?
Yes, absolutely. Bring your laptops on Friday because Dwayne does not have computers for you.
Photoshop works so much easier when you actually have a computer instead of a pen and paper.
That's right. I will bring a couple of laptops with me in case somebody needs to use one. But yeah, bring your own laptop. It's always better to work on your own computer.
If
I'm
you
gonna
want
try
to
to
bring,
install Photoshop on my watch for that.
No, no.
you're
My
on
That
your
would
wife,
own,
be
Mike.
hell. That would be hell working on Photoshop on a mobile device forever and ever and ever.
The class will start at 10 o'clock. I will be there no later than 9 and likely closer to 8:30. So if you need to set up equipment, full computers, be there as early as possible and I'll make sure to let you in.
Okay, so now I'm going to get out of LAB mode. And to get out of LAB mode, you simply go back to Image menu, Mode, and click on RGB and say Don't Flatten, and you're back in RGB. It'll look exactly the same. Nothing will change. LAB interprets your colors so well that you will see no difference between the RGB and LAB. Something's happening, but you'll barely see it. All right, now um, we've got a snappier looking image. I think we're able to separate the values and the colors much better than before. But we still have these highlights that we're dealing with. Highlights are still kind of getting in the way. And because the highlights are getting in the way, it's also killing your color on the trunks of your trees. So I'm going to share just a quick little technique I think you'll love. That's going to help correct that and improve upon your image. All right, so let's go over to our channels. The key to mastering Photoshop is mastering selections. Selections, channels, and masks are exactly the same thing. Now, for some of you, I'll find my website real quick. Oh, what's wrong with my computer today? Come on. Thank you. Um, if you have never had a Photoshop class before, under my workshops, I've got the Photoshop here. I've got a beginning workshop coming up, which is where are you? Intermediate introduction to Photoshop, right there. This starts right after the fairgrounds end in San Diego, so it starts in July. I think it's like July. Oh, what's the date on that? It's up here somewhere. Yeah,
July
July
24th.
24th. Yes, 24th. Okay. So sign up for that. Um, if you feel that you've already have the basics of Photoshop down, you're going to want to go to intermediate Photoshop class with the Wacom tablet. That's as far as I'm going to let anybody here go. I rarely let anybody go straight into the advanced. That rarely happens. So the intermediate Photoshop that starts right after the beginning Photoshop ends in September 4th. Um, and they're all 5-week workshops. That's the only way you learn this stuff. In fact, here, I'm going to copy the link and just put it in the chat box real fast, just for your convenience. Okay, that's the intermediate, and then I'll go back and I'll get you the introduction real quick. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna copy that, and then we're gonna go back to work here. All right, so then Photoshop here, and then the advanced class starts when all that ends. So that's actually I got one coming up in June, but I rarely let people do the advanced class right away. The advanced class are for people who've already taken the intermediate class, and they're going to go right into that. So, okay, let me just close this out and let's go back to Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to my channels. The key to mastering Photoshop is mastering selections. Selections, channels, and masks are exactly the same thing. So I want to find a channel between the red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue that's going to best isolate my highlights from everything else. You guys tell me, is it the red channel, the green channel, or the blue channel?
Isolating in terms of what? Bringing it out or
Just,
burning them
is,
out?
just isolating the highlights in general. Just all the bright areas. What isolates the bright areas away from everything else the best? Red. I read no, because we got a lot of highlights coming up in here, right?
Hmm.
Green, better, because it tones down all this tone in here, which we can easily tone down, right? But we go to blue, all that tones down, the water tones down dark. That separates it better, don't you think? All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to duplicate that channel. No, duplicating the channel is not Control J. You have to click on it and drag it to this icon just to the left of the garbage can, and it makes what's called an alpha channel. It's an additional channel. I'm going to use curves to better isolate my highlights. Control M for curves. Pull this over to the side a little bit. Okay. The values is where it matters. Toning it down. We're going to tone down those highlights. If I pull this down like so, see what's happening? I want to go to now take a look. This represents your highlights. So I might put a dot dead center to keep keep the midtones where they are. But if I put a dot in the middle of my highlights and bring them down, all right, then I can isolate my highlights better. And here's my lower tones down here. Maybe I can isolate my lower tones a little better. You see where I'm going with this? You probably don't yet, but you will.
Well, I'm trying to. Why are you trying to keep your midtones? It looked pretty good before you.
Fine, we can take and bend those down. You don't like it that way, go that
No, no,
way.
no. But I'm just, I'm just wondering why you would or concentrate. I mean, why you would want to leave your midtones.
Whatever the client wants.
Oh,
No,
okay. Right, right.
no, I'm teasing. Here
Well,
we go.
because it looked pretty nice before. Well, I don't know. Let's see where you're going
All right,
first.
let's tell you what. Let's take them all off. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. If I bring it straight down to here, it looks pretty good. I just actually you're right. It does look pretty good like this. The reason I guess what I really want to do is kind of bring this down to right about here, and then put a point for the highlights. Bring it maybe up a little bit so that I can isolate these highlights a little better.
Hmm.
I'm playing around with this. Maybe that's about as far as I want to go. I'm going to click OK. All right. Let's go back to layers. Let's bring up an adjustment layer. In fact, before I bring up the adjustment layer, I'm going to make a selection from this channel. The key to mastering Photoshop is mastering selections. Selections, channels, and masks are exactly the same thing. The shortcut to making a selection from this channel is Control or Command, and then hold it down, and then left click right on the icon for the blue copy. Boom, there's my marching ants. These marching ants represent that channel. Now I'll go back to my layers. See that? The marching ants, this is the marching ants equivalent of isolating the highlights. Now I'm gonna go grab the curves adjustment layer, the black and white half circle and the dead center in the bottom. We learned all about this, the adjustment channels in the intermediate class. We learned exactly what these do and why they do what they do. We come down here to curves and select it. What just happened? If I hold down the Alt or Option key and click on the mask, I simply brought over this channel over to the adjustment layer because selections and masks are exactly the same thing. All I did was say, make it a selection, and anything that's a selection is what's going to be affected on this mask. So when I started up the curves adjustment layer, it honored my selection and brought it on over as my mask.
Stephen.
Yes,
So before, when you were when it was the channel, we were seeing gray tones, and now as a selection, it's just selected or not selected.
that's right. Selections is a poor representation of your channel, but nevertheless, it's your channel. It's the same thing. I'll prove that to you right now. Let's make a brand new layer, right? Just like this. And I am going to fill that layer with black. Alt, backspace fills with the foreground color. Control or Command backspace fills with the foreground color. Now I'm going to go over to the channel, this blue channel right here, and say, okay, Command, click on it to make marching ants. Now I'm going to go back to my layer right there. I'm going to turn it on. It's black, right? And watch what happens when I fill this with white, which is Controller Command backspace fills with the background color, which is white. The exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. Easier way to do this, if you want to transfer this channel to your layer, right? Okay, I will select all. Let me hit select all, Command A, and then hit delete to delete everything in there. So there we go. So now an easier way to do this is select the channel, Control C for copy, go back to the layer, select a brand new layer, and then Control V for paste. Boom. Did the same thing. The key to mastering Photoshop is mastering selections, channels, and masks. It's exactly the same thing. Does that help shed a little bit of light? I assume that's a yes. Okay, good.
You just
All right.
showed three different
I'll give it a
ways
yes
for
also.
creating a very complex layer mask very easily.
Yeah, very easily. We're not done. Okay. So if I hit the Alt click on here, you get to see what I'm doing. Now, the reason I did this is so that I can affect the highlights more so than everything else. So I'm going to give this a layer blend mode, very simple. And we learn about layer blend modes in the intermediate Photoshop class. Right up here in normal, we drop it down and we have our layer blend modes. I want the one that's going to make everything dark. Grab multiply there and drop it down there. Okay. All right. Let me pull this down a little more so we can see the entire curve. All right, so if I turn this off before and after, see it's toning down those highlights now. If I feel they need to be toned down more, I can come over here to the curves and do something like this. Now, I want to do one last little thing, is I want to add a Gaussian blur to this curve. To this, not a curve, but to the mask. So I'm gonna get in close. I'm gonna go to, let me get in closer. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Look at that. You see what happens? I'm gonna turn it off again. Preview off. Now notice my blur radius is about 7.6. So before, after, before, after. It's sharpened back up with more luminance. We're editing the mask, not the image. That's why it worked that way. Okay, let's do now, if you feel that we still need a little more highlights to be a little more detail up in here, or a little more density, you can always duplicate this layer. Command J, and that's obviously way too much. So we simply bring down the opacity to something you can tolerate. So that's all 10%. Or better yet, do this. I have a better idea. Let's just delete that one. If that's all you need to do here is just to go over here and give it a straight curves adjustment layer. And you can apply a multiply just like this, which gives us some nice, detail across there. And then I'm using my Wacom pen after I hit Command I on the adjustment, right? Right there on the mask, Command I to switch from white to black. I'm using my brush, right? I'm using my Wacom stylus, and I'm gently going to start adding little details right across there, and that'll help just add the little extra detail, like down here in the grass area. Bring all that down. These are the little things you're going to have to do to master your imagery. If I feel that I need a little more strength in this tree here, all right, pull this on down and give a nice light touch all through there to pull that on down. A little more in the leaves, wiggle it around a little bit, give a little more strength in those leaves in there. So, and then of course we can do other little techniques as well. But you're getting something that's a little more interesting. Is that making sense so far?
Yes.
Should we grab another image and see what we can do with that? So apply the same concepts. Now, this is just introductory stuff. I mean, we're going to get into the meaty stuff that you're going to absolutely adore on Friday. But this is like, ACR is for the beginner people who's at this stuff. But at least it makes a point. It's making my point. I'm going to go Control Shift Control, and let's see, toning it down, work in progress. I'm going to save this and I'm going to call it class project 001 so I don't lose it. Okay, let's go get another image. Control W, get rid of that one. Well, when it's done saving, it'll close. But in the meantime, Control Shift O, bring back bridge. Let's pick something. Something we can control. You know what would be a fun one? This will be a good one here too. Just to make my point. This has got some extreme tones. And this was taken in the Bay Area. And we got this, a lot of tones are blocking up a lot of the detail. And then we got this brighter white right into here. So let's see how we would handle that. Another snapshot, but snapshots are good just for practice. Another one that's good for practice is that one there. If we have time, we'll come back to this one as well. So let's do this one real quick. So I'm going to Control R for Adobe Camera Raw. It's a JPEG, so I'm going to Adobe Camera Raw. As a habit, we come down to the optics. I think that's a little below, and then go to Remove Chromatic Aberration. I think everybody knows what that is, and go to my profile, and I believe this was what lens was this? I don't think this is my Canon lens, I believe. That's been so long ago since I recognized it. Okay, good. No, I don't even like what that did. No, I don't like that. It chose the wrong profile. Sometimes Photoshop gets it wrong. So, okay, use profile correction custom. What did I do? Uncheck this. Oh, I see. Canon, Canon, Canon. And that this was more, I think this was my 100mm lens. Uh, no, I don't like that either. Gosh, this is kind of bizarre. I'm going to just turn off that profile and keep it the way it is. So I don't remember what lens I used. Okay, so I'm going to go back up. This was taken a long time ago. Colors in our way, right? Get it out of the way. Wow. Like a big blotch of darkness there. This is why colors got to get out of the way. This is going to be the hardest thing for you guys to do is to start with color. Now, this technique is for the stuff that you really want to be your award-winning imagery. This is not for your commercial stuff. You could apply this to your commercial stuff, but while you're learning this, I wouldn't. Just apply it to more of your award-winning stuff. You're going to enter into competition. Um, I'm gonna go to the top here, and we're gonna pull the shadows out, right? Now Dwayne mentioned, well, what happens if my exposure is off a little bit? I don't know. Is it off? I can go here and bring it up a little bit like so. Maybe that makes exposure a little bit better and start there. You're going to know if this is correct or not, because as you start to work with your shadows and the highlights, it's going to tell you automatically whether or not you should have messed with the exposure or not. So I'm going to go to the shadows first, deal with your shadow details first, and pull them out. See? Look at that. Look at that. When I pull those shadows out, now how does the image look? It looks too bright now, right? So I probably shouldn't have brought that exposure over to the right. So I'll just double click it and bring it back. Just for now. I can always pull it back a little later. In fact, here, I'll just pull it up not as much as before, just about right about there. All right, now, Control plus, kind of getting close to this. Now I can see this beautiful detail all through there. Now, highlights. Pull it down. Wow. I pulled this out. Now remember, you guys now know that when we took the color out, Photoshop is now working in LAB. Just that act of pulling the color out is now in LAB. It's not touching the color, only touching the values. So already I've got some nice detail in the highlights. The shadows, I can still bring out more detail. Oh, what did I do here? That's a shortcut to rotation. I found something new. I didn't know that. All right, so let me kind of control bracket to the right and bracket to the left is a shortcut for rotation, one way or the other. Cool. Let's learn something new. Getting close, getting close. So by pulling up the shadows, and it brought up a lot more detail, but I've got even deeper shadows in here that's blocking up detail, right? So that's why we go to blacks and pull those up like that. See? That's about as far as I'm going to be able to go. All right, now I'm going to go to whites.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Especially when you're pulling your blacks, uh,
Yep.
how much are you dealing with noise?
You're going to get a little bit of noise. You got to go out. You got to go into the noise sector and pull it out. We can inspect that too.
Okay.
There's always noise in digital imagery. Okay, so let's see. Where was I? Oh yeah, the whites now. So we're gonna go to the whites and pull that down and see just and the whites really work best with the extreme whites, which we don't really have that much of an extreme white here. But if I pull this down, whites, yeah, that's good enough. Okay, that's good enough. Let's bring this back a little bit so we can see what's happening overall. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now let's go down and reestablish our depth, which is our shadow details. Dehaze. I'm not going to take it too far down because I've got clarity, which will help add more contrast to the midtones. And look at the sky. The sky is starting to richen down a little bit, which is what I want. If I go to clarity, there we go. Look at that. Now, wow, that's popping. Look at the water. Now it's reestablishing that those tonal differences between the highlight values and the lower mid-tone values. I'm gonna go over to highlight of textures now. So it's getting a little closer. There. Look at that. I'm gonna be careful with this one here because it can get real crispy. You don't want it to look unnatural. See, now we've got detail all through there. So, like Dwayne mentioned earlier, what's going on is that now your black points and your white points are being placed how they should really look in your image, which makes your color places your color in the proper areas, so that you get this nice, strong, depth-filled color image. All right, I'm gonna go do dehaze and pull that over a little bit more. There we go, something like that. I like rich, deep blacks. All right, let's go to the color. Let's bring the color back. See that slider? Let's talk about this again. If we go any further, it's going to be garish as heck. But we've maintained a lot more detail. Look at that. It's three-dimensional now. It's really popping out at us. It's really popping. And this is just a stupid little bit of technique I'm showing you now. So let's talk about again what's really going on here. Something I haven't mentioned before. The fact that your color, this is all the color that you need. If you look at the range of information between where the saturation slider sits and where it should be, you've gained that much more information that's still in your file. So you're going to get something with a lot better detailed looking image because that detail is still there in the color because you haven't touched the color until now. See, the further you go to 255 on saturation, the more you wash out the color. If I go back to 0, that's the 0, which is way too garish. It needs to be right over here to be more natural.
And that blows me away using that saturation. That's where it's changed.
And I think that you want to take a break, Dwayne, a little bit. Dwayne? Is Dwayne there?
He's mute.
I am here. I just need to remember to press my unmute button. We're going on 8:30. If you want to take 10 minutes, we can do that.
You can do that. All right. And it's probably a good time for a little bathroom break or something for everybody. Then we'll come back and we'll tackle another image. I'm gonna click done. And just for giggles, before we go on break, I'm going to do this. I'm going to duplicate this. Where's my mouse? Where did I put it? There we go. Okay. Right click, duplicate this. And on that duplicate, bring it on down here. For that duplicate, I'm going to right click and develop settings, clear those settings. There we go. That's before, after. Before. This is what your raw sensor gives you right here. This is more of what you want, expressive wise. Before, after. All right, break time. We have until 9 o'clock, right?
9 o'clock or until you run out of voice.
Okay, 9 o'clock is good. All right, we'll do this one here. I suppose we can tackle that one. Let me see with some other ones here. Yeah, that will be a good one.
Rainbow Falls is always a favorite.
Yeah, Rainbow Falls, Suquamish Falls. Is that what that is? Suquamish Falls? Suquamish Falls.
That looks like Rainbow Falls at the top of Mammoth on the far side.
No. This is in Washington.
Okay.
No. It's in Seattle area.
Snoqualmie.
Suquamish Falls. Yeah, this thing is gigantic. Yeah, Suquamish Falls. This is when I was up doing a presentation at the Adobe headquarters in Seattle, and the group took me over to photograph. That was fun. Okay, so we got that one, and we've got, this would be better actually. I think this will be better.
So, Stephen, while you're pulling this up,
Yep.
I just checked the registration. We have 2 seats available for Friday.
Oh, great. Yeah, so guys, take it.
I will put the link in the chat box.
2 seats available. It's going to be filled up like last time. This is great. This is very, there's a couple groups I do presentations to that seem to be very ambitious about learning, and yours is one of them, and the dark room is another one that I've been to. The dark room is in San Diego, just very ambitious about growing their skills. Okay, cool. Let's do this one. The reason I'm choosing this one is because I think it's going to be more a practical application of your post-processing skills as well as what we just learned. Um, okay, so let's go and open this up. Control R, just real quick. And actually, no, let's not do that. Let's not do this first. Let's just open this straight on up into Photoshop. I'm gonna hit the enter key, and we're gonna work this as if we wanna, do a print of it. So one of the things that's wrong with this is that the location of this little structure here, the ring, I'm not liking that. So I'm going to come over to see where is that tool. Content aware move tool. Third tool down. Now, I like this down on two layer structure for my toolbar here. It's easier to track stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna come over to get the content move tool. Let me hit Control J so that I can duplicate this. And I think I'm going to just select this whole area because what this is it's a lasso tool, basically. I'm going to loosely lasso this, and then I'm going to recompose it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it right about there compositionally, and then hit enter on the keyboard, and boom, there we go. I've just moved it. And Control D. And this is going to be my new base layer at this point. Okay, so from here, we're going to select the stairs. Okay, we want to put your compositional elements, kind of your main compositional elements on its own layer. So I'm going to go right over here, the second tool down the right hand side, and I'm going to grab what's called the object selection tool. If I mouse over the stairs, Photoshop automatically sees it as a selective object. And when you click it, it will give you your merging ends. And then all I need to do is hit Command J and put it onto its own layer. All right, so I've got a background and I've got the stairs on their own layer. I might also want to go back to this, the one below, getting close to the ring. And I don't want that entire ring. If I click it now, it's going to grab that whole shape, and that's not what I'm looking for. So it may be I'm going to have to use instead my quick selection tool. And it's a brush, right? And I'm just going to just quickly select it like so. Bring it around the edges here just very quickly. So this is going to give you a much more of a practical, because this is what you're going to do in reality when you're working on your stuff, because things are not always going to be in a proper place. Once you get your composition right, then we can go into the techniques of toning things down or up, or wherever direction you want to go. Now I'm going to grab the inside, Alt key, grab the inside. That works pretty good. Getting closer and pull this down. This tool is learning, right? This quick selection tool is learning. It's trying to determine exactly what it is you want to keep and what it is you want to go away. And I'm going to go right along those edges there. Now, if you want to be really precise, hold the Alt key, take it away. If you spill over, no big deal. If you really want to be precise, hit your Q key for quick mask. So you can just paint in exactly where you want your selections to go. So if you paint with white, all right, I have to select the brush first too. Hit the B for the brush. paint with white. Oh, I did hit the B for the brush and it still didn't go. All right, so we'll come over and just manually select the brush since it wants to be stubborn. Bring it on down, bring the size of my brush down, not so hard. I don't want too much of a soft edge. Now this is all attached to my Wacom pen. You'll learn this in the intermediate class with the Wacom tablet on how to use the tablet. There we go. And come over here and select it out exactly the way you want it. All right, hit the X key to paint with red. Painting with black gives you red because it's just the mask. That's why it calls it quick mask. I'm missing some areas in here. And I'm precisely selecting exactly what I want. Cool, that looks pretty good. I got some outside here. Paint with white to discard for the mask. Just quickly take it away. I always adjusting the size of my brush accordingly. We learn all this in the intermediate class of the Photoshop, in the Photoshop class. So I'm going to kind of pull this on out a little bit. That looks good enough. That's good enough. So what I've got is another item that I'm going to place onto its own layer. Hit the Q key again, and you've got my selected ring, and then Command or Control J, and now there's the ring on its own layer. Okay, matter of fact, we'll bring it to the very top to make it easier to kind of track. I'm going to place all these in the group. So that one selected the top, hold the Shift key, select the one at the bottom, and then Control G for group, and that groups it. And I'll just call it layers. All right, open it up. Now, let's go edit this. We're going to make them all smart objects. And then we're going to go back into ACR. Select this layer, right click, and convert to a smart object. Right click, convert to a smart object. And right click the ring and convert to a smart object. So I'm going to call this one ring. I'll double click and call this one stairs just to keep organized. And then I'll double click on this one and call this one wall. All right, now I'm going to go tone this stuff down. Let's start with the stairs. No, we'll start with the wall. We'll start with the wall. Command, or basically Control Shift A is a shortcut to go to Adobe Camera Raw. There it is. And there's my wall. Again, make it a habit, pull out the saturation. You don't care what's going on with the stairs because all you care about is what's going on with the wall. The wall's got this interesting gradient going on. A lot of ways we can handle that, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top, go to my shadows, pull up these shadows inside the ring just a little bit. There we go. As you can see, it starts to even out the shadows everywhere. From here, I think that's really good enough. I don't think there's not a real highlight in here, but I'll go over to the highlight just to see what it does. All right, I'm gonna leave it alone. There's no reason to tamper with it because there are no highlights. It's all one continuous medium gray. So if we go down to dehaze to reestablish a nice richness in here, there we go. We come over to clarity, give it that contrast nice, and then texture even nicer. So that's better than before. Go back to saturation, pull it up, and look at that. Right there. That's where it wants to be. So you've got a lot more. Now, if you look at this and read this properly, you've got a lot more information here. A lot more information. Even if I pull over just a little bit more just to see what I get. Okay, that's good. And I'm going to click OK. I'm done. That's one layer. Next layer, go to your stairs. Command Shift A. Use your shortcuts. Time is money. Command plus. All right. We don't have a lot of shadows in here, but we'll pull them up anyway. So we go to the top, pull up, not much to pull out because it's already pretty bright in the shadow regions. But we got a lot of highlights, so pull those down. Look at that. Pull those highlights down. It's nice and flat now. Okay. Now I'm gonna get in a little closer so we all can see this a little better. What I forgot to do, silly me, was take out the saturation. Okay. All
Wonder
right.
why you're working in color.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm getting ahead of myself. And you see presenters work this in a similar way with the color on. Take the color off. Color is getting in your way. It really is. And it's hard to see where your details lie and where your shadows and highlights, how they should be separated when color is on. Get the color completely off. It's going to be an extra step in your workflow that's going to improve your work. Bring it down. Go to the effects tab, go to dehaze, richen it up. There we go. I may need to bring it, I'll bring it over right about there because I know clarity is going to add a little extra pop. So bring the clarity over and there. Look at that. Look at that. See that detail, that crispiness, the dirt, the mud, the graffiti is now starting to pop out. I might bring over the dehaze a little bit more. There we go. And a little bit more on the clarity, teeny bit. Yeah, that's nicer. See, that looks like dilapidation going on here. Now, sharp the texture. Look at that. Wow, there we go. Not too much. It looks unnatural, but just enough to kind of give it a little extra pop. Now bring in saturation. Look at this. Look at that. Right about there. Look at that. You get pure tone and pure color this way because you force Photoshop to go to LAB. We're done. So click OK. Boom. See? Before and after. You have them all on their own layer. Now let's go to the ring. So go to the ring, Command Shift A, Command or Control Shift A. Let's go ahead and just zoom in close to this. We don't really have a lot of shadow in here. Let's see how much shadow we have. But we got to turn off the color first. We can't see anything until we turn off the color. We go to the shadows first. Yeah, there's not much in there. It's not worth worrying about. So we'll just go directly to highlights. There we go. See that? Pull those highlights down. We've got detail in the highlights now. Now we can go and establish our base tone, which is going to be through dehaze. Clarity next, mid-tone contrast. There we go. And then your texture. If you find that you're getting noise in your image, you're going to come down to the details and you're going to deal with the noise reduction. And the noise reduction you're going to be dealing with, obviously, is going to be the standard noise reduction, not the color noise, because we're not touching the color. So if I'm going to click I'm going to go back before I do any of that because that's just the ring. It's not going to matter so much. And I'm going to go and bring back the saturation here. There we go. Right about there. That looks good enough. And click OK. Boom. There we go. So if you feel that, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. That one, like this, if you feel the stairs are a little bit too dark, remember you can always go back on the stairs, go back to Adobe Camera Raw, right? And maybe bring up the exposure a little bit. And then come back. There we go. All right. So it's all non-destructive workflow with these smart objects. If we go to the background, and again, if we feel that there's a little noise in there, we'll go back and double click on the background, the raw editor for the background. And it's hard to see the noise in this image because there's so much texture to begin with. And then once again, but where you do see the noise normally is in the shadows. Again, very difficult to see anyway, but if you need to reduce your noise, we'll come on down to the Details tab and go to the standard noise reduction and pull this on over just a little bit to pull that little bit of detail out, noise detail out, to soften it up a little bit. And it's better to do this once again with the saturation all the way over. You can see the noise better when it's without the color, because color is always getting in the way. So if I come on back down and play with this, see if I go all the way to the right, you can see how it's mucking it up a little bit. You just need a little bit of noise reduction. Then we can go back and bring back the color. And click OK. So it was very subtle little change. All right, so here we go. So this was just an intro to all the stuff we're going to learn on Friday. On Friday, we're going to be getting into the LEB space. We're going to be getting to some other very interesting techniques and just philosophical processes that with your thinking process has got to change so that now we're going to manipulate. Let me show you some examples of my own personal work. Let me go back to my website here and we'll go over to showcase and photographic art. All right. So, learning to control, using values to control the eye where I want it to go. So that background is flattened out and deepened for a purpose. To keep your eye in the foreground, let your eye see that there's something back there, but it's something in the foreground. The original image is so much more subtler and so much more beautiful in terms of color and tone. This is a JPEG we're viewing through the website.
I was just going to blame it on Zoom compression.
Yeah, yeah, but Zoom can do it too. But you get to see how I'm using values to control what the viewer looks at. There should be no accidents in your image. Everything you do has a purpose. These blacks did not exist in the original photo. This was all a very bright gray, all of this, and a white on the bright gray. Using values to enhance the depth in any of the images. This is shot in Death Valley. This was shot in San Luis Obispo. Again, using values to enhance, to make color better. Another shot from San Luis Obispo. San Luis again. All right, playing around with composition and values, almost in an abstract way. Love the sand dunes because they're very difficult to do. They're very difficult to compose. The racetrack, which Dwayne has brought to my attention, that the tracks don't really exist much because of the floods. I'll wait a couple years to go back. This was done in Eastern Sierra. This was in the Santa Cruz area. Again, just using values to control the eye. Eastern Sierra workshop, which is coming up, and we got several people from this group who are going on it already. In fact, I'll get you guys the link for that. This background did not exist the way you see it. It was very bright. I had to use values to tone it down, to tone it down. I had to use values to tone down the highlights, to balance them out properly so that I want the viewer's eye to stay right in this area here. This is my master class that I did in Joshua Tree National Park. Again, in Joshua Tree National Park. It doesn't matter where you are. Eastern Sierra Workshop. We got some fabulous ghost towns there. This is on the way to Bodie. Actually, no, this is not on. Yeah, this is
It
not on the
looks
way
like
to
one of the cabins that's about 15 minutes past June Lake on the way up to Bodie on the side of the
exactly
freeway.
on the way up to Bodie. Yeah, on the side of the freeway. That's exactly correct.
Not that I've ever driven by that.
And it was just a dilapidated cabin I saw and decided to stop. And Death Valley. So I'm always using values to express myself. So okay, so before we go, you guys can look through this. I will here, let me go up to the top and I'm gonna give you the link to the workshop. So the photography workshop, there's two coming up for the end of the rest of the year. Eastern Sierra and then the Death Valley in November, which is a real blast. Eastern Sierra's color is outstanding, and I truly mean outstanding. Go to the chat box, which keeps disappearing on me, and this is Eastern Sierra. There we go. There we guys for your convenience. And then the other one